For hunters, there's an unmatched excitement in the pursuit of prey. Out in the wild, nature is both a companion and a potential threat, capable of changing in an instant. Sometimes, hunters themselves become the hunted. When facing an aggressive bear, the question arises, is it better to carry bear spray or rely on a gun? On October 13, 2018, the hunting season was in full swing. Bob Legasa, a seasoned hunter, had always found solace in the mountains, away from the chaos of modern life. At 57, he had spent a lifetime enjoying the outdoors, drawn to its beauty, and the way it sharpened his senses. The sights, sounds, and smells of nature enchanted him, and the primal instincts of hunting called to him. For Legasa, hunting was more than just a hobby. It was a way to provide for his family, a responsibility he took with pride. In October 2018, Legasa traveled from his home in Hayden, Idaho to Montana with one goal: to hunt elk. This wasn't his first hunting trip. He was accompanied by his friend Greg Gibson, a local guide in Montana. Earlier that month, Legasa, who also worked as a filmmaker, had enlisted Gibson's help for a project. Together, they produced a short video demonstrating the effective use of bear spray. In the video, Gibson shared expert advice with viewers, emphasizing the importance of being aware of one's surroundings while out in bear country. He explained that while bear spray can still work at close range, it is far more effective if deployed early. This allows the spray time to impair the bear's vision and breathing, possibly halting its charge before it makes contact. Both Gibson and Legasa were experienced, and the video reflected their knowledge. They were no novices. Legasa and Gibson arrived at their chosen hunting spot, located near the unincorporated community of Gardner in Park County, Montana, just outside Yellowstone National Park. They set out with the goal of finding a herd of elk, with the challenge of hunting a rutting bull elk in mind, one of the most sought-after prizes for hunters. As they made their way through the area, the two men remained alert, aware that every little change in the environment could signal a potential threat. A hunter's sharp senses are their greatest asset, and while precautions are always necessary in the wilderness, the unexpected can often catch you off guard. While walking through tall sagebrush, Legasa and Gibson suddenly stopped dead in their tracks. Standing just 36 feet away were a 500-pound grizzly sow and her 2-year-old cub. For a moment, all of them, human and bear alike, stood frozen, too shocked to move. But that stillness was shattered when the cub, likely frightened, stood on its haunches and let out a growl. This noise triggered an immediate reaction from the sow. Without warning, the sow charged straight at Bob Legasa. In a flash, Legasa didn't have time to grab his bear spray, but both he and Gibson started shouting loudly in an attempt to scare the bear off. It didn't work. For a split second, Legasa briefly thought that perhaps the bear was just bluffing. However, it quickly became clear that the sow's protective instincts had kicked in, and she was intent on tackling him. Before he could react further, Legasa had a fleeting, almost absurd thought. The bear looked like a football player going in for a tackle. Then, the bear slammed into him, knocking him to the ground. The 57-year-old hunter found himself knocked to the ground. In the chaos, Legasa had just enough time to raise his arm to protect his face. However, the grizzly quickly clamped down on his left arm with its powerful jaws, sinking its teeth deep into his flesh. At the same time, the bear's claws began tearing at his face. The animal's only intention seemed to be to maul him, but Legasa wasn't alone in this terrifying moment. Greg Gibson, just a few steps behind, didn't freeze in fear as his friend was attacked. Instead, Gibson quickly drew his bear spray. With one powerful shot, he sprayed the grizzly. The effect was immediate. The bear paused its assault on Legasa. But instead of retreating, the grizzly shifted its attention toward Gibson. Gibson, not backing down, deployed another burst of bear spray, which finally caused both the grizzly and her cub to retreat. Although they were out of immediate danger, Legasa was sure his arm was broken, and both men had taken a hit from the bear spray, partially blinding them and stinging their eyes. Covered in blood and unable to see clearly, they managed to hike out of the area. Legasa would later recall that, despite the mauling, the bear spray sting was by far the most unbearable part of the ordeal. The backlash was completely unexpected, Legasa recalled. The vulgarity was off the charts. Death threats and all sorts of nasty comments, mostly from people who oppose hunting and from the vegan community. On the other hand, I received a lot of support, but it was definitely overwhelming. Despite the negativity, Legasa remained resolute in his love for hunting. He told reporters, "I'm going to get back out there. Hunting is in my DNA. Being in the mountains is where I belong, and I'm already counting the days until I can hunt again." In February 2019, months after the bear attack, Legasa traveled to New York for an interview with Animal Planet. Despite his concerns that the show might present the story with an anti-hunting bias, he recognized the opportunity to get an important message across. He wanted people to understand that hunting isn't driven by malice, but by many different reasons. Additionally, he emphasized the importance of carrying bear spray as a primary defense. "It's your first line of defense," he said. "It gives you a better option than just relying on a firearm." In Legasa's case, his belief in the effectiveness of bear spray was validated. Had Gibson tried to shoot the bear while it was on top of Legasa, there was a significant risk of hitting Legasa instead. But what do you think? Do you believe a firearm would have been more helpful in this situation? Share your thoughts in the comments. When a hunter becomes the prey, things can quickly take an unexpected turn. Richard Wesley's black bear hunt took a shocking twist when he inadvertently startled a bear in its own territory. Caught on camera, it was only when Richard later replayed the footage for his family and friends that he realized just how fortunate he had been. The bear, however, wasn't as lucky. Richard Wesley was an experienced hunter, taught by his father, a skilled hunter and trapper in Ontario, Canada. Hunting was something he did regularly, and his ultimate goal was to hunt black bears using only a bow and arrow. He loved the thrill of the hunt, carefully tracking the animal from a distance before quietly moving in for the perfect shot. Though he was skilled, Richard never gave much thought to the dangers of hunting, particularly the risks of hunting a powerful predator like a bear. His father had taught him not to fear anything, to stand tall and be strong. However, sometimes fear is a helpful companion. It's what keeps you alert and alive. In the spring of 2019, Richard was hunting in northern Ontario. He had rented a cabin and spent his days tracking black bears in the area. Ontario is home to one of the largest black bear populations in North America, with estimates between 75,000 and 100,000 bears. It's a prime destination for bear hunting. Most hunters use high-powered rifles or shotguns with slugs for short-range shots. But Richard, preferring the challenge, had opted to hunt with a bow, a quieter, more traditional method that required greater skill and a closer range to ensure a clean, lethal shot. When Richard left his hunting cabin that morning, he had no idea that the day would take such a dramatic turn. Little did he know, it could be his last walk, his final steps, the last time he would pull back his bow. He set out on foot, determined to track down a black bear. He moved quietly through the pine forests, stopping occasionally to listen for any signs of movement. His destination was a spot he believed was promising for bear activity. Eventually, he reached an open area where the trees had been cleared. Fallen trunks and branches lay scattered across the ground. The sky was overcast with heavy, low-hanging clouds that added to the bleakness of the scene. He knew there was a bear in the area. He had been tracking it for a while. Then, as he walked along the path, he spotted a black shape in the distance, the unmistakable round form of a large black bear. Richard had finally caught up to it. He was recording the hunt on his GoPro, and the footage shows the bear foraging for berries in the open space. With its head down, it rooted around, oblivious to the danger it was in. Richard carefully slipped off the track and crouched beside some fallen trees. His heart raced in his chest as he waited, knowing he was in a vulnerable position. With little cover, a poorly placed shot could turn this bear into a deadly threat. The bear continued to move, seemingly unaware of Richard's presence, coming closer to Richard's position. He held his breath, watching and waiting for the perfect moment. He knocked an arrow onto his bow, ready to pull back the string at any second. His nerves were steady, but the breeze had picked up, adding a crosswind he had to account for when taking his shot. The bear, still focused on foraging with its head down, suddenly looked up. Less than 20 feet away, it noticed Richard. He immediately realized that this was a dangerous turn of events. Startled, the bear charged at him with incredible speed. Its massive paws hit the ground with thunderous force as it closed the distance. Richard yelled in an attempt to scare it off, but the bear was in full charge. He raised his bow, but it was already too late. As he retreated, Richard tripped over fallen tree trunks and branches, scrambling to escape. In a single leap, the bear cleared the obstacles and was face to face with him. Richard saw the full force of the attack, the bear's claws and teeth closing in. The sheer power of the animal sent him crashing to the ground. Clutching the arrow still in his hand, his only defense, he recalled his father's advice. A bear's nose is its most vulnerable spot. Despite being pinned, Richard managed to jab the arrow a few times into the bear's snout. With a sudden shift, the bear released its grip and jumped off of him. Richard lay still, holding his breath, waiting for the attack to continue. But it never came. The bear, seemingly satisfied, turned and ran towards the tree line. Richard, incredibly fortunate, watched as the bear lumbered away. He had survived. Shaken but largely unharmed, Richard got to his feet and slowly made his way back to the cabin. Aside from a few bruises, he had emerged from this encounter with one of Canada's most formidable predators, relatively unscathed. The rush of adrenaline still pulsing through him, Richard couldn't help but feel thankful. His close call with death had ended in his favor. After showing his family the video footage, Richard realized just how fortunate he had been. His wife, overcome with emotion, broke into tears, and his father's face showed pure concern, almost in shock. Richard had casually described the attack to them, brushing it off as just another part of his hunting experience. But as he rewatched the footage and saw his family's reaction, it finally hit him how narrowly he had escaped danger. This close call brought a new sense of appreciation for life. Richard began holding his loved ones a little tighter, cherishing every moment more than before, and he no longer took things for granted. However, the story wasn't over for Richard. The bear, though merely protecting its territory and reacting out of surprise, left a mark on him. Richard, determined to seek closure, chose to return to the same spot. Though still shaken by the encounter, he decided to take a different approach this time and shot from a tree stand. Recognizing the bear by a distinctive white scar above its eye, Richard waited until it was in range. With steady hands, he raised his bow and fired. The bear fell, and Richard completed the task he had originally set out to do.